down 31.4% in 2022. Is ASML stock a buy for 2023? I'm going to answer that question in this video using several different metrics, so let's get right into it. The first thing I'm going to look at is ASML's revenue growth over the years going back to 2014, and you can see a very nice upward trend, explosive upward trend from less than 2 billion to close to 6 billion in quarterly revenue. And even though the semiconductor industry faces headwinds in the near term, over the longer term you can continue to expect growth. Management has forecast very nice growth out to 2025 and to 2030 for several key metrics. So even though the near term is challenged, longer term the industry is expected to grow, and I think those expectations are reasonable to be sure. The next thing I want to look at is ASML's operating profitability. Is it increasing along with revenue growth? And the answer is yes. Operating profitability is growing very nicely along with revenue growth, growing from less than 600 million in 2000 before 2014 all the way up to close to 2 billion in its most recent quarter. So very nice demonstration of economies in scale, growth in profits along with growth in revenue. I love to see this in an investment. The next thing I want to look at is cash flow from operations, and I want to see similar growth like I see in profitability. And that is true for the most part. If we go back to before 2014, the company was hardly generating any cash flow from operations, and that was up to over a billion in its most recent quarter. It went as high as over 6 billion earlier in 2022, but ever since the outbreak there's been wild fluctuations in its cash flow from operations, and the semiconductor industry has faced major ups and downs. It's a cyclical industry as it is, and the pandemic just made it even more cyclical because of the uncertainties around consumer demand and supply. All of that created this wild fluctuations. However, longer term, I expect the company to continue on that path, growing its cash flow from operations. Management said as much in its most recent investor day, so it's looking good in terms of cash flow from operations as well. Finally, let's look at ASML's valuation to determine if the stock is a buy for 2023. Looking at the price to free cash flow metric of 27.33, that's about as cheap as the company has been according to that metric going back before 2019. And then when we look at the forward PE ratio of 32.76, it's almost as cheap as it's been going back to 2021. So both metrics, if we look at its relative history, is about as cheap as it's been. So you've rarely been able to buy this stock at a cheaper valuation, but that's understandable because of all of the headwinds that the semiconductor industry is facing right now, the inventory gluts and the slowdown in consumer purchasing of electronics that tend to use a lot of these semiconductors. So the slowdown was to be understood and the decrease in valuation was to be understood. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't make a good investment. In fact, I will recommend ASML stock as a buy for long-term investors because of all the tailwinds longer term. Going out to 2030, there's a lot of tailwinds that's going to support industry growth, and ASML as one of the leading edge technology providers in this industry is likely going to ride that tailwind higher. So investors can use this short-term headwind as an opportunity to buy an excellent company like ASML, so long as you're willing to hold this investment for several years and even longer if you need to. Don't try and make a trade out of this one over the next 3 to 6 to 9 months because the industry is still adjusting to the ups and downs from the pandemic. Alright, so that's all I've got for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.